Bismillah. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salami ala Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam amma ba'd. We begin in the name of our Lord and we praise Him and we send the best benedictions and peace upon the seal of prophethood Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. To proceed, we are back and we want to greet everyone. Peace be upon you all and thank you for joining us. And CJ and Carol, salamu alaikum to both of you.
Walaikum
Walaikum
salam.
salam wa rahmatullah.
I thank you guys for joining me again this week. And Adam, of course, he's unable to make it with us this week due to something going on. And so, we look forward to having him next time. What we want to do today is we're going to discuss some of the major topics of chapter 13 and 14 from the book Message to the White Man in America. And chapter 13 is entitled Love for God's Creation. Love for God's Creation. And chapter 14 is Persecution of the Believers Once Guidance Comes. And I think that part of the discussion is going to be about that persecution, but we'll see where the conversation takes us. What I wanted to do by way of opening it up before we actually begin the conversation is to read something from the book. And, it's going to be a fairly lengthy thing, but, we're going to read it and this will give us a foundation from which to go. And I'm not going to do this regularly. I already said, reading from the book is going to be boring and I don't, that's not my interest. But in this particular regard, I think that it would be helpful. So, Bismillah, those who reject this guidance will go on persecuting the believers and anyone who aids them. But this persecution should not prevent us from striving upon the straight path. It is due to ignorance that we, as a people, continue to reject guidance. Ignorance of self, ignorance of history, ignorance of Islam, and ignorance of why the believers are persecuted. The guidance is there, but we continue to refuse to hear it, refuse to listen, keeping ourselves at a distance so that we, even if we are a majority, remain the other. Sadly, this also means that our people remain ignorant. We are not being asked to adopt the languages or cultural identity of other people. We will retain our own cultural identities. We will remain the white man in America, but we will also be Muslims, living upright lives in accordance with the guidance of God. We need to be able to accept this reality amongst ourselves. Only then can we sincerely accept it from other people. Seeking to distract ourselves, we actually I dropped down. I forgive me. Either we are chasing after the so-called American dream, or we are chasing after intoxication, fornication, and gambling, or we are simply seeking to distract ourselves with mind-numbing entertainment. All the while, we claim we are just trying to get by. In this way, we have all lost our way, lost ourselves, lost our families, friends, and communities. We prefer to suffer through this life rather than to begin living according to the guidance sent to us by God. While it is true that God can set all of our affairs aright, this does not negate that we must still do the hard work inherent in change and growth. It is this fear that we change. First, though, courage must be shown, courage to even listen to the message. Know that peace and happiness is not attained through having what others have, but rather having a relationship with your Lord. True peace and happiness will only be found under the banner of faith and submission. And while this very word is repulsive to us as a people, this is what we need. God is our provider and He wants for us good. So why do we choose to remain slaves to a system of serfdom and not stand upon our own as real men, as believers, whom the very earth itself was created to serve? The first step is not to break free of the system or to somehow throw away our cultural identities. Rather, the first step is to listen to the message, weigh it, and see it as truth and accept it into our lives. Only then will we enhance our cultural identities and become strong enough, become brave enough to break the bonds that hold us enslaved to hedonism and greed. We need to come face to face with the history of those who submit to God and those who strive against those people. All of the prophets were sent to guide their people. All of them called their people back to truth and righteousness. All of them called their people away from the status quo. And so, because of this, the believers have always been persecuted. And again, reading that section, I jumped around a bit, and so this meaning in the chapter, I didn't read it straight through, but these are points that I thought would be beneficial to start the conversation.
Oh, okay. Well, I think, uh, um, we're living in a world that's not submitted to God. I mean, that's really the reality of it. I mean, it is submitted to God in a real level because whatever goes on, God could end it any moment if he wanted, but he doesn't. But when you're in these corrupt situations and stuff, and it can be on such even a low level or a high level, all around you, or even just a little bit, the corrupt are always going to be against something that's standing up to their corruption. So it's sort of like seeing, like, there's justice, there's the justice of God. It's identifying what is just and what is putting things as they belong. And then you have another group that maybe they're not purposely doing so, but they're not trying to put things where they really belong. They're just, it's just corruption. And anytime there's corruption, anyone standing up against corruption is going to be persecuted by the corrupt. I mean,
It's
that's the
it's interesting, and CJ, if you had something, I apologize. I just What you said just reminded me in the Quran of the story of Pharaoh. And the story of Pharaoh in the Quran is that he got in front of his council. He told the council, he said, I am just trying to call you to what is right. I'm just trying to, help. I'm just trying to serve you. And so he believes, perhaps he believes it, perhaps he doesn't, but he's telling his people, I'm just trying to protect you. I'm just trying to protect you. While Moses was trying to call them to the truth, Pharaoh, in his own way, thought that he was trying to call people to what was right. And so the people who fight against the believers, they're not always, they become evil because they're fighting against the truth, but they're not inherently evil. Some of these people, not saying Pharaoh, I'm just saying in general, some of these people really believe that they have what's better or what's best for humanity. And so they're not even willing to listen to the truth.
yeah, that's and probably, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm like that sometimes in my own life, daily sometimes. Maybe I think I have a better idea or something. I'm trying to do the right thing, but it's the wrong thing. It's
Mm,
not it's not it's not conducive to really being in submission to God. And when we lose sight of that, when we lose sight of the idea of God and this kind of things, we open ourselves up to corruption.
mm.
We make corruption easier to come in. I'm sorry I slur when I talk. I used to take speech class when I was a kid.
It's no problem. It's no
And
problem.
we let that in, and then when we remember, we stop and think, oh yeah, maybe I should have done it a different way or whatever. But being in submission to God is a little bit more than just saying it. It's actually trying to live that way in a conscious manner. And some people make fun of people like Christians. Sometimes we'll make fun of Christians, the ones that just go to, I don't believe all Christians are just go to church on Sunday. I don't believe that. There's a lot of Christians that are deeply religious people, but we are like that in our daily lives too. We in submission 24 hours a day, every minute, or did we go out of submission for about 15 minutes and come back and then go out again? That's what I see our condition. It's because we forget God.
Mm.
We forget that we're in submission and what we're in submission to, and that opens us up to corruption.
Allah, He says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. He said, don't be like those who forgot God, and so they forgot their own selves. Indeed, those are the people who transgress.
Right, right. And so small transgression, I don't know how you guys are. I'm just a regular person. I'm not
We're human.
yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
Bismillah.
I, I'm nothing special. Trust me, I struggle daily.
yeah, everybody does.
So
Yeah.
I think that, and that we return, and I don't mean that. That's the whole purpose of this particular podcast is that, and again, and I don't mean this to sound any kind of way, but we could fill it with scholars. We could bring scholars on. We have close, dear friends of ours. We have teachers of ours who would be willing to do this. But the idea is everyday Islam from everyday people for everyday people, and that's the idea behind this is to convey the message from people who live it to people who perhaps they haven't heard it, or perhaps they haven't heard it in a way that is conducive to them. And so we're just human beings, man. We're just human beings.
Yeah.
CJ, did you have anything to say?
I did, but I forgot what it was.
I'm sorry. When I came
Mashallah.
in, when I came into this, what I was really thinking is reading over these two chapters, I was really focused on a couple of points. So one point is that the idea that white folk in general, especially in America, they identify generally as one of two things. Either A, they identify as Christians, and white people are supposed to be Christians, right? Either that's their identity, and if you become a Muslim, or you become, for that matter, a Buddhist or a Hindu or something like that, you somehow betrayed your actual race, right? And so the other way is that they identify that we are evolved higher and farther, and we no longer need religion. And so they actually become materialists. And so that because of those two things, they're not willing to hear. And because, again, Islam, we've had 20 years of Islam being presented as the enemy to the United States, at least 20 years of Islam being presented as the enemy to the United States. And not just that, correspondingly to the white man in America, then
Oops, there he went. Hmm.
He'll be back momentarily.
can you hear
Yep.
me? Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
we
I don't.
back.
can now.
It's notifications on my phone. My apologies, but what's more is that they'll say, because if you listen, they're not willing to listen to. I'm sorry, I don't know where it cut off, but they're not willing to listen to the message of Islam because they're better than that. They perceive it as something backwards or outdated or something like that, and so in reality, they either believe that because they're white and American, they're supposed to be Christian, or they're supposed to be atheist, and they become contentious to the message, and they're not willing to even listen to the message. And then when a person such as ourselves, when we enter into Islam, then they become hostile to us. We become the other, and we become othered. And so because of that, there's this what can we say, there's a natural opposition from our own people, not towards us but towards the message itself. And so I thought that that would be perhaps a good place to discuss, a good theme to discuss based upon these two chapters. And I mean, there's a lot to be said in these two chapters, honestly.
One of
Okay,
the
so
most common things I hear from other white people is, "Oh, that's cool if you want to do that, but that's just not for me." I'm like, "But how do you know?" Well, uh, they just don't want to listen.
Right.
It's very common. My supervisor at work, he's a very godly man. He's a Christian. He does what he believes he's supposed to be doing in accordance with God, but he will not listen to a word about Islam.
Did he say why?
Nah, he just walks away.
Mm,
There's a
good
couple
enough.
other Muslims in the job, and then also, there's a couple other people that I conversate with. And if Islam is what comes up in the conversation, then that's what comes up, and that's what we talk about. It's not often. I'm usually not the one who brings it up, but we're not scared to talk about it.
Right, of course. Of course. Good enough. Carol, you sounded like you was about to say something.
oh, well, my senior moments here. I'm a little bit I'm a little bit on the Ding Dong Express a lot of times, but you are persecuted after you become Muslim by the society at large if you're a white person. They do act like you're a traitor a lot of times, and it's incomprehensible to them because they have all these preconceived prejudices against Islam. You have the news, and we're the new objectified enemy, because, the quest for oil and resources that's going on over in predominantly Muslim countries. And, they have to objectify the enemy. So we get stuck in that. And it has gotten worse over the last 20 years or so. It has gotten quite a bit worse. So I don't know. We're supposed to be. It just goes with the package deal, I guess, when you become Muslim. And this is part of what happens. It's just, and
I've seen. Now go on.
No, go ahead. It's okay. Talk.
I don't want you to lose your.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm on the ding dong all the time. I always ding dong. Don't worry about it.
No, I was just going to mention. Earlier I was actually, two guys were having a conversation pretty much all week, and it was directed at me, but I've been busy. So I sat down today and I went over it so I could respond to them. And one of the guys was basically saying he doesn't understand why any white person would enter into Islam. And he basically said that he believes that it's a form of insanity. That was his position, that for a white person to enter into Islam, it's because they're emotionally or psychologically unbalanced, right? That was his position. And I go on.
I was getting ready to say, I feel it's the other way around. If you don't want to accept Islam, it's because you're emotionally or intellectually challenged.
I would certainly say that a person who refuses to even hear the message, that they should recognize their own bias. They should recognize their own bias. And the fact of the matter is that, first and foremost, look, what is insanity? If we wanted to define insanity in a legal context, of course, I'm coming from an Islamic legal background. But what I'm saying here is that to be considered intellectually challenged, if you will, it means that a person can't tell right from wrong. Like, you can't tell benefit from harm. So the example given is that if you was to say to a child, I have a crumbled up $5 bill, and they have they have a crumbled up $5 bill, and I have a shiny 50-cent piece or a shiny quarter, and I'm like, look, I'll give you this shiny coin if you give me that crumbled up piece of paper. And they would make the exchange because they don't understand the benefit, what the benefit is. Then that's a form of mental incapacity. They're not mentally fit, And so if a person can't tell what is beneficial from what is harmful. So an example of this, we'll give a quick example. I seen this, again, I hate alluding to social media, even though we're on social media, but I seen this psychologist from Erie, Pennsylvania, saying that she doesn't like to call pedophiles their MAPS. I forget what it stands for. Some minor attracted persons, and justifying this abuse and predatory behavior towards children, preying upon children, and this will get traction. This will actually get traction. This idea that this is some kind of, whatever, the fact that these mental illnesses are seen as something to be normalized, transsexuality, homosexuality, that these things are seen as being things that should be normalized, is a form of insanity. People can't tell truth from falsehood, good from bad, benefit from harm. Because they can't, that by definition is a form of insanity, legally speaking, of course. And so I agree, that people who automatically think that Islam, the religion of Islam, if you will, the way of life of Islam, is the enemy. This is an indication of intellectual challenge, deficiency, you could say.
Yeah. I would agree. I say on a regular basis, like, I don't believe in dumb people. I think they're just ignorant by choice.
A lot of times.
Society, at least here in America, I feel, has been dumbed down almost to the lowest common denominator at this point, where everything is based on what we what we argue about, the few minor things that we disagree about, is what's pushed onto the forefront. Whatever can be done to separate us is what they're going to do.
Divide
And
and
now,
conquer and distract.
yeah, and I think it's no accident that two presidents ago we were allowed to start using government propaganda against the people. It's been legalized now for the government to use propaganda on the citizens,
Right.
so they can just as they wish. I have no proof that they have done this, but if they wished, complete false news stories, feed it to the media. Here, you have to push this out. This is what we're telling you to do. It's
There's evidence of this, but I mean, I don't want to get into that. But there's
right.
evidence that they've done this, and you're absolutely right that the psyops have been legalized in our nation, and these are, but all of it, and it goes back to again, distracting people, getting people to argue about non-issues, and divide and conquer. Now,
Yeah.
Carol, I'm going to say I heard some pretty deep breaths there, so I'm going to ask,
I'm
you
trying
see
to
him.
keep them. I'm trying to keep my microphone up so I
Uh,
don't. I seem to lose words when I'm talking, so I'm trying to keep the
I
microphone up. And it's a depressing subject too.
yeah.
It's kind of depressing, in some ways. But um, we don't have to be. I don't know. We don't have to look at everything necessarily as we're being oppressed, as maybe it's causing us to think about some things, and we don't have to think about what the media wants to tell us to think about all the time, but we do run into that, especially playing around on the computer, or watching the news. It's a bad situation, but the biggest problem is there's not enough standing up against corruption and falsehood anymore, and that people are basically told and being programmed to think that they should do nothing and say nothing. Like you can't even say anything. You can't even say this is wrong. I mean, you take your little map thing. I mean, this isn't even common sense anymore.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah,
we
they
had a we had a child here that went into one of the park restrooms. Okay, when I was a child, if somebody had a little boy, a little kid, kind of
Hmm.
toddler and up a little bit, they didn't take him into the men's restrooms. They took him into the women's restroom.
Correct.
The mom was standing outside the restroom while I don't know if it was her nephew or her grandkid or who it was in there. Somebody walked in, slit his throat, and walked out.
Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, it was
Salam.
horrible, but the thinking is
Salam.
so far from reality anymore. It's like, okay, everyone's been told this politically correct way to think about everything that's going on around them, that common sense has gone out the window.
And that's the big problem. There's a war against common sense.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
common
it's not
What?
so
sense.
common anymore.
Right.
There's nothing in Islam is against common sense.
What I'm
No.
gonna say here is that no, and well, I'll start by saying that I was actually again back into that conversation I was having earlier, that when they asked why a white person would enter Islam, I said because it's rational, it's reasonable, it goes along with our reason as human beings. So
Yes.
intellectually it's sound, but not just intellectually is it sound, but even our hearts incline towards this message. It's something that we already know as part of our fitrah, as part of our primordial nature. It's something that's already there, and then when it's introduced to us, we're like, well, duh. It's like really, I've already known this. I just didn't know that that's what this was about.
Right.
Two things that I want to say about what our sister was saying is that, and they're both hadith from the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The first one is he said, "Min husni Islam." I'll keep it English. He said, "From the excellence of a person's surrender and submission to the guidance of God, from the excellence of a person's turning their affairs over to God, is that they leave that which is not meant for them. They leave off that which does not concern them." And this is from, from our manliness, from manliness, is that you don't go digging into other people's business. You don't busy yourself with what everybody else is doing, which is something that social media does. It distracts us with other people's lives, with other things that have nothing to do with us, and we are not responsible for it. But then once it becomes into our realm of consciousness, then there we have responsibilities. And that takes me to the next narration. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man ra'a minkum," whoever from amongst you sees an evil, anyone amongst you who sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. Right? Let him change it with his hand. And if he can't change it with his hand, change it with his tongue. And if he can't change it with his tongue, change it with his heart. And that is the weakest of faith. And let me explain this narration real quick and briefly. So if you change it with your hand, it's gone. So somebody's going to do something bad and you stop them. You stop the bad thing from happening. It doesn't exist because you stopped it, right? And when we say our hands, we don't just mean physical. I mean, we don't just mean with our hands. It means physically. If you, whatever you have to do to stop it. And then if you're incapable of doing that, whether because you're weak, whether you're afraid, whether, whatever the case might be, you're not able to do it for some reason, then stop it, change it with your tongue. And how do you change it with your tongue? You say, hey, don't do that, right? That's the very first simple thing. Call the police if you need to. Where we come from, we don't like that. But the fact is that that's their job. It's supposed to be. And then if you can't do it, just make other people aware. Look, man, don't do that. I know you see what they're doing. It's wrong. Don't do that. Whatever the case, teach, preach, call out, whatever the case might be, change it, stop it from happening with your tongue. You're not going to eliminate it from society altogether, but at least you'll protect some people from falling into it, those who listen. And if you can't do that because you're too afraid to do that, or you're too weak to do that, or whatever's in your way and you're not able to do that, then at least change it with your heart. Meaning, supplicate to God and ask God to change it. Dislike that thing in your heart. Don't allow it to become normalized in your heart. Because once deviation from the norm, from the natural, from that which is right becomes normalized in your heart, where's your faith at? Right? You've lost your faith. Once there's a normalization of deviance, your faith now becomes weaker and weaker, and you start accepting wrongdoing. And that's what the LGBTQ community is a good example. And I don't mean to beat on them today, but it is what it is. They slowly, incrementally normalize their deviance to where now to people of faith are now accepting it as no, you can't speak ill against them. This is madness. This is madness. And so we have to be people who we change wrong with our hand. If we're not able, we change it with our tongue. If we're not able, change it with our heart. If you don't do that, it becomes normalized. And once it becomes normalized, what happens to your heart?
Becomes corrupt.
Well, it's not even accepting. I mean, it's gone past accepting normalization. It's creating alliances with it. I mean, this is where it's getting really, really going out to the bizarre, that you're going to make an alliance with something that is so against common sense in order to get something else you want. I mean, or acceptance. This isn't standing up to anything when it's going to that point.
These are the same people that don't know how to define what a woman is.
Yeah.
Like how do you have a nominee for one of the highest positions in the nation that can't define what a woman is, and she herself is a woman? No, I'm not talking about the Supreme Court justice. There was another nominee for a different position. It was a female. Mashallah.
I thought she was talking about the guy who is pretending to be a woman for
No, that's like from the Department of Health or whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
No, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Let's just stop real quick and say just 3 examples of the highest office where you have these people who can't even decide what kind of human being they are.
Right.
They let me rephrase that. They've decided what kind of human being they are, right? But it goes against common sense. It goes against science. It goes against biology. It goes against DNA. It goes against what we can actually literally see.
Yeah.
So and we're supposed to accept it like this is normal, like this is okay.
Yeah, like we're the ones that are wrong.
Exactly. We're
And
and that's the thing is we're supposed to pretend like something's wrong with us because we're saying that that's wrong. It's wild times, man.
A
Wild
lot
times.
of
agreed.
a lot
And,
of things have been taught over the years and said to people, particularly women, to make them take risks when they're out in public that just women were not told to do when they were young. And I keep telling people this. When I was younger, right? I'm 65. So when I'm at that age where I'm at the end of the baby boomers, the very end of the baby boomers. But the people, a couple of years ahead of me looked more like, uh, with those dresses that those dresses like from Mad Men or something, that kind of clothing. Oh, anyway, when you think of it, like they had the flip hairdo and girls had the beehive, that was a little bit older than
Mm,
me, right? But everyone was programmed to the point of that. It used to be when we walked down the street, if some strange guy talked to us, we just walked a huge berth around them. We didn't
mm.
even respond. And now you get threatened sometimes if you don't respond.
Well, what's more is the
Yeah.
women are forward.
Yeah, they're
yeah.
forward. Yeah, they're forward. Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, I guess the men have their own problems in the street too because of this, but um this isn't or like that one on Twitter where they has the man shaking hands with everybody and they were making a big politically correct statement about why wasn't the women shaking hands with this guy? Well, why would they? I mean, a guy can
Mm.
grab you and shove you in a car. I mean, what where's the thinking? Where's the intelligence that just basic safety measures we took growing up until
Well, I mean, we're talking now about gender normalization and or I should say gender role normalization and again going back to what we talked about over the I forget what day it was, but about the fact that it is the role of the man to defend and protect the woman, and it is part of the woman's role to help the man do this by being mindful the circumstances and situations. How does she carry herself? How does she speak? How does she dress? All of these play into the safety and protection of the woman, which is really the job of the man.
But yeah, that's true. It's a lot. Yeah, women are making it harder for men to even fulfill that role. But when you have people telling people to do all this stuff that they're saying is politically correct on some idea of how they think the world should be, when that's not how the world is,
Mm,
it's just adding the pathway to having more and more and more. Now we have this mess going on with the gender thing
right.
because everyone was already being brainwashed into, oh, that's not fair. Well, that's not fair isn't the issue.
Mm.
The issue is what's reality, what's really going on.
And go back again, what's right and what's wrong,
Yes,
you
Yeah.
know,
yes,
and
yes.
that has to be addressed. You know.
My father used to tell me on a regular basis, life isn't fair, and that is something that I tried to instill in every one of my children. You're not gonna get what you want if you ain't trying hard enough. If you're not working for it, you're not gonna get it. That's just not how life works.
Were you brought
That's
up
just,
Catholic?
I was. I
There
was
you
brought up
go.
I was brought up Roman Catholic, but I was
Yeah.
actually asked to leave the church at a very young age because quote, I was too inquisitive.
Oh yeah. I have to say the Catholic upbringing, just hanging around that church all through elementary school, I have to say I got a full dose of life isn't fair just from going to catechism class and seeing special things like that. It's interesting. Like sometimes I can identify Catholic from what's our new term? First generation Muslim,
yes, first generation Muslims.
generation
Okay.
Muslim.
We're
So
just real quick. We want to normalize it. We need to get rid of the term convert. Revert doesn't apply to us. Convert is problematic because when a person is a convert, they are perpetually new. They're always ignorant. They're always somebody who is needy. They need the attention. They need to be taught. They need to be educated, and they don't really they're not equal. Right? A convert is somebody. Oh, they're convert to Islam. They're new to Islam. right? By saying we're first generation Muslim, A, it establishes that we're Muslim, but it also says we are the ones who entered Islam. And so it puts us on an equal footing with anyone else. And this, we want to normalize this term. We really need to normalize the term first gen Muslim, you know, and get rid of these terms. And that's one of the things. And it's funny because these, you know, a lot of what we're talking about, I have no no idea we'd be touching on these things. But the fact is that allowing other people to label us disempowers us, and it gives them a certain power over us, how to perceive us, how to think about us. But when we start identifying ourselves and telling people how we identify, that empowers ourselves. So these labels that they want to put on us, convert, revert, whatever, you know, I don't accept those labels. I am a first generation Muslim, you know, and this way I'm not perpetually new to Islam. I'm not perpetually new to Islam. I'm not a perpetually new Muslim.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
it's a good idea. I like the
Yeah,
idea. Yeah, I like it. I like it.
What I want to go back to the some of the idea in the book, and we covered some of this last Thursday. And again, we want to reiterate something, you know, and this is in chapter 13. I'll probably share chapter 13 in the description, but it begins with a verse from the Bible, actually, the Gospel of John, the 8th chapter, 42nd verse. It mentions Jesus is talking, and at the end of this verse, he says, I have not come on my own accord. I did not come on my own accord, but rather he sent me. Or I didn't come of my own accord, but rather he who sent me. And this is, it's important to understand that when we see this verse, Jesus is telling us, I don't have complete agency. I'm a servant, right? God is the one. I'm here on behalf of God. I was sent by God. And so he is distinguishing himself from God in that verse, right? I can't do what I want, rather I am doing that, the will of the one who sent me. And we didn't talk about that, but what I want to talk about, I do want to talk about the Trinity, but I also want to talk about a very important matter, and that is that our concept is that God is absolutely one. He has no partner or equal. That is what Islam teaches. That is the core belief. La ilaha illallah. There is no God. There is nothing at all worthy of worship except the one true God. That is what every single Muslim believes. Even the people who we might consider a deviant sect or a group that we don't agree with, all of them, every single Muslim, as their very core, is La ilaha illallah. There is nothing worthy of worship other than the one true God alone. That is the message of Islam at its heart, at its essence. That is the heart, the message of Islam. And he created us into nations and tribes so that we can know one another. But these nations and tribes, they're biological, right? They're family, they're blood related, is what I'm saying. It's not a matter of faith. And so somebody who is, for example, Irish, both of you, I believe, are Irish from previous discussions. I could be wrong. But, you know, somebody who is Irish and they enter into Islam, they're still Irish. They're still Irish. The fact that they converted to a faith other than what they was upon, right, does not take them away from their ethnic group. One last thing, real quick, is that we have to understand that our ethnicities, our biological ancestry, which, you know, we could say race, our biological ancestry is a reality. It is a reality. And we have to acknowledge these differences amongst ourselves, and that we are a people, a group, an ethnic group. We have to acknowledge that and stop pretending like there's no room for this recognition if we want to, you know, really progress.
I like to remind people that Christianity started in the same region of the world that Islam came from.
Yeah.
If Islam is a foreign religion to them, why is Christianity not?
I pointed this out to somebody, and they said, they're white nationalists. They were like, this is why we call it Odinism. And I'm like, you know, that's you know, so you're going to go back to paganism because you believe that's, you know, because of your ancestors, because you connect with that as a racial affiliation. So
Right.
the question is, are we going to reject the truth because of racial affiliation? Is that where we're at, to where because of the color of my skin, because of how God created me, I'll reject the truth? Is that where we are as a people? And it's a serious question.
Ignorance is boundless. It's boundless. I'm not even shocked anymore at the ignorance that people display.
Yeah, on a lot
Um,
of
Well,
topics.
yeah, a lot of
sometimes
topics.
I think you have to think about conditioning people have gone through too. And I often talk about this, that we've had two generations dumbing down education in the United States and causing a lot of these social problems, being brainwashed into people. So we have a lot of people now who are adults whose parents were also brainwashed in the same way. So if you've been conditioned to think that way, you're just not going to see the same things as somebody who realizes that this is just wrong. And we're Muslims. Like, if someone becomes Muslim today and they enter into Islam, and if they're hanging around, just a Muslim community in general, that it's not on this woke bandwagon, which seems to be infecting a lot of it, they'll start seeing things. It was like you were mentioned last week, Brother William, about you didn't realize that a parent nuclear family was the norm until you went to Morocco. Right.
Syria, but yeah,
Syria, I'm sorry, Syria. It's sometimes you don't realize something's odd until you see the
until you step
opposite.
out of it. Yeah, no,
Yeah, until you're
absolutely.
kind of behind,
A person a person doesn't know they're sick until they get healthy, or they see what's
Right.
healthy, for that matter.
or they
Absolutely.
see someone else who's healthy. Yeah, they
Right.
didn't realize that they were this ill until they saw someone. Wow, like that person, like even just a health thing. Maybe you could even be physically ill and not realize it. And then you
Right.
see
No.
someone who's really healthy and you're like, "Ooh, I really let myself go. I'm not very healthy." This
Right.
Yeah.
sort of thing. You sometimes you have to visually see things. And I Muslims do have to do a better job of being visually presenting themselves in society as reflecting goodness and reflecting what humans want to be. Your book, you brought up the point here. Okay, where is it? He wants for us good. So why do we choose to remain slaves to a system of serfdom and not stand upon our own as real men, as believers, whom the very earth itself was created to serve? Well, if we're not going to even be what these believing, what the whole earth was made to serve us, at to that level, we've given up we've given up our responsibility, and we don't deserve the earth to serve us anymore. We have to live up to our responsibilities, and we have to think, are we if we live up to our responsibilities and we take that to heart, are we being responsible in doing what we're supposed to do as vicegerents to our life, our community?
Vicegerents. Yeah. No.
Vicegerent. I'm sorry, I don't talk right.
No. No. No.
Vicegerents.
No.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And this thing being more visual, and the persecution we have now, part of it, I mean, besides things like people trying to hit us with cars or whatever when we're crossing the street, but part of the problem we have now is the media has fed in so much propaganda against us that all people can hear is the media when they see us. They're not seeing the fact that we still have homes. We still have children we're responsible to, that we live really normal lives. We're not we're doing our best not to have drugs and stuff in our home on our own. They're not seeing the good part of Islam, because the persecution of Muslims in the media and everything has gone so far.
They're not even hearing the message.
No, they're not hearing the message, because the media has already made them focus on everything else. Oh, they're funny clothes. Oh, they're
Well,
the
they are always
women.
going to. They're going to present the angry other, the
Right.
angry other who's shouting and screaming, "Death to America!"
Right.
That's the Islam they put into the media. Or the woman who is assaulted or beaten or worse by a group of men. This is what they're going to show into the media, as opposed to what is the actual message of Islam. And that's again why it falls on us to present the message to our own people.
But when I first became Muslim, that was not the message that was spread out in the media 40 years ago. I was telling somebody, yeah, when I finally decided, I became Muslim basically as over the years, I just kind of realized I thought like a Muslim just through reading and all this kind of stuff. So I just thought, well, I might as well go find a community of these people. They seem to think like I do, right? But I wasn't listening to this bombardment going against, directed at Muslims like this that goes on now in the media. I don't know if I even would have heard the message if I had been around that kind of uh, propaganda and stuff going at such an intense rate. You understand what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And again, that's part of the problem, is that it bars people from hearing the message. The propaganda is so strong that people aren't open to even hearing the message, and that's part of our trial, or our, what can I say, our difficulty is overcoming that. How do we break these barriers? And race is important. Allah, again, He told us in the Quran that He created us in the nations of tribes that we may know one another. And it's also so that we may know ourselves. And one of the things is that we have to stop pretending I don't see color, or that we're all the same, right? Because we're not. We have different features, we have different heritages, we have different cultures, we have different backgrounds. There are different ways that we see the world. There's different ways that we experience the world. And we have to acknowledge that. And I think that one of the important things is that, and this is again where our role comes in, white people in America and around the world have a right to this message. They have a right to hear the message. They have a right to have it presented to them in a way that they can understand and relate to it, not as a hostile other, or not as something foreign being brought to them, but as something that they can relate to, as something that they can actually hear. And you know, the same way that differences are real, biases are real. And so if the only people presenting Islam to me when I was in my late teens, early 20s, if the only people presenting Islam to me were people who dressed funny, looked funny, spoke funny, couldn't formulate a clear sentence to explain to me, articulate to me this message, why would I have listened? How would I have accepted the truth? How would I understood? How could I relate to it? And so we have to have people who we have to have our people presenting the message to our people, and it's a role. And again, this is the wisdom from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he rose up, he brought up prophets from amongst their own people to teach their own people, so that their people could relate to them, so that their people could understand and know them. And this is it's important that we can we get rid of these barriers by calling our own people. And there's nothing racist about that, and we also need to deal with that. This isn't a call for racism. There's no room for disrespect or injustice towards other people just because they look different or sound different or dress different. We don't disrespect or commit any injustice. We're not better than anybody else, and they're not better than us. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the black is not superior to the red, nor is the red superior to the black. The black is not, meaning the Arab. The Arab is not superior to the non-Arab. The non-Arab is not superior to the Arab. The black is not superior to the white. The white is not superior to the black. The fact is that we're all equal before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Lakin akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most noble of you before God is the one that has the most piety, right? And that's what differentiates us with God, not our outward appearance, but what are the choices that we make. And what's more is that we could say that we're all guests, and I believe that this is in chapter 13. We're all guests of God in this world. We're all guests of God in this world. And this faith in the divine, this faith that la ilaha illallah, this faith that None that has the right to be worshipped other than God alone. That's the unifier. It's not our outward appearances. What unifies us is our hearts, right? It's our hearts. We don't have to be connected because we all look alike or sound alike. And that's another thing to touch upon. And I don't want to go on this, long tangent, but we have to be people who, really we retain our identity as we read. We retain our identity. We retain our we could say our culture, our heritage, but we purify it according to the guidance of God. And when it comes to the other, when it comes to the African American, the Latino, the First Nation, or immigrant Muslims from wherever they come from, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, تعاونوا على البر والإثم تعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. Help one another. Sorry, when it's the Quran, it's better to say it in Arabic. Help one another, assist one another, support one another in good and piety, but don't help one another in sin and transgression, right? And so the color of our skin, it's not a racial message. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what background you come from. But what I'm saying is that the people who are white, they need this message presented to them in a way that they can accept it, just like other people need it in a way that they can accept it. And that's our role.
Yes, and I would also like to add that okay, we're different tribes, so we know each other and all that. This idea of trying to say there's some big monoculture tribe or something
No, there's
in
none of
Islam
that,
and
man.
stuff.
To
It
homogenize the whole. No.
Yeah, like we're all homogenized, yeah, but it's not accepting other people, it's dismissing them on a real level. Different cultures, you accept that that's a different culture, or that's their view. That is accepting somebody, not acting like they don't exist by insisting they're not different from anybody else.
Right.
We are different from everybody. Everybody's different in some way. And I think it's almost negating people out of existence to act like this doesn't exist.
This is one of the reasons I chose the people for the show that I chose, right? Because I have my own background. I don't count, right? I don't count. But CJ, I know CJ. He's from the inner city. I know his background. He can bring that perspective from the inner city. I know Adam is from the South. He's a Southern man. He can bring that perspective. You're from the West Coast. You happen to be a woman. You can bring that perspective. And so in this way, everybody, and again, I have a brother who is Hispanic that's going to be joining us. I believe his heritage is Puerto Rican. I'll have an African American friend of mine also join us from time to time. And the thing is that we all come from different backgrounds. So we have to be able to relate to one another. We're not all the same. We're not. Even white folk are not all the same. Just speaking of those of us here, we're different, and that's we want to present the message to the people who are like us, and we're not all the same.
Right. Right. Well, do you have any thoughts on what would be the best way to give the message?
CJ?
For me, the best way to spread the message of Islam is to live the message of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody sees what you're doing, like for instance, me, I have a shaded past. Anybody who knows me from before, they see what I'm doing now, and they're like, "Oh man, I'm proud of you. This is what you're doing." Blah blah blah. You know what I mean? So they see the difference in what the truth does to people. So just just live the example. Live the message. That's the best way to show it.
And I'll add to that, reaching out to your neighbors, reaching out to, your relatives as well. And that could be problematic in itself, but your neighbors, your relatives, and offering food, asking them, actually showing that you care, really caring, and then showing that you care, because unfortunately nobody does that anymore. And we had a neighbor at our old where we used to live a few years ago, and the neighbor actually wanted me to come over and talk to them about Islam. And I said, what caused this or whatever is, maybe they was reading up or something, who knows. I said, yeah, but is there a reason? And they said, yeah, we want what you have, right? And that's really what it came down to, is that they saw something from my family, and I'm not making any claims. This is what they said. But they saw something, and they wanted that. And that's the same thing when when you're kind to your neighbors, when you show that, when you show Islam, just kindness, respect, good etiquette, kind words. Your kids aren't using foul speech. You're not using foul speech. You're honoring people. You're respecting people. You're respecting yourself. People recognize that, and that opens the door to actually presenting the message. And one last thing that I'll say about that is that, I'll go to Sister Carol's thing and say, having a tech, or Zawiya, or a Ribat, having a center of our own, wherever, however that might, be, and actually having functions, having, serving dinner to people in the community, feeding the poor for that matter, but even having people over and, just having conversations, not preaching at them. People don't want to be preached at. Have conversations. Again, this is why this podcast, or whatever we want to call it, that's why this isn't me just giving a lecture. We're having conversations because people don't want to be preached to. We want to have conversations with people, and that real humanizing, showing them humanity, right? Showing them our humanity, that's a better way of saying it, as a Muslim. That's really what's going to affect people's hearts and get them to think and ask questions. And at the end of the day, really, it's their asking questions that are going to lead to answers.
Yeah, I usually don't. I mean, I'm on, playing on the internet or something is one thing because these are uh, conversations on purpose. But I don't usually bring up anything about religion unless somebody asks me
Yeah,
somewhere. Like I don't say anything to anybody about it. They can
that's
see. They can see I'm a Muslim. I mean, but I don't usually say something to them. Like,
my sheikh, my sheikh, my first sheikh, Sheikh Khalil Majlawi, may Allah preserve him. I mean, he said he never would miss an opportunity, even if he was on a plane, he would just break out into conversation with somebody about God, and not necessarily Islam, just reminding them about God, and I'm not that guy. It's not always easy, and people always don't want to hear about God. I find that rather than talking to people about God, sometimes listening to what they're going through and offering them solutions and offering them the solution, because Islam has the solution. So you don't have to say, Islam says, but offer them the solutions, because once you offer them the solutions, that's what they need in their life. They're looking for help. They're looking for help. And so, but we can't go, we don't go, we're not standing on a corner with a microphone like some people do. This isn't proper etiquette, in my opinion. I mean, God knows best.
I
CJ, you
had
was
a.
going to say something.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
no, I'm
No.
sorry. I don't see very well right now, and so I'm actually having to see a doctor. I'm seeing a neurologist and
Oh,
stuff. So everything's a little bit fuzzy.
Inshallah.
I don't quite see the mouths when they start moving and that. But
okay.
I had a job. Yeah, I've had low level jobs like cashiers and this kind of stuff. And I used to work in a thrift store, ringing the stuff up, and I'm relatively friendly. I can talk to people if they start talking to me. And I had numerous people telling me they had no idea Muslims were even nice. And I was like, oh, and I had a situation when my children were in school. They went to a Catholic school for a little while. I'd be in the parking lot, you're talking to the moms in the parking lot. And one of them asked me if I was scared of my husband. I was just like, uh, no. Does it look like I'm scared to go home? And then she was like, well, no, not really. I said, well, no. No, I'm not scared of him. He doesn't do anything scary to me. But I mean, this is what people are thinking when they're looking at us, that we're uh, living a life of abuse, suffering, or something for the women. It's just kind of,
Right.
you think you're having a nice conversation with people for a few months out in the parking lot, and then you realize what they're really thinking is, wow, I wonder if she's getting beat up at home.
And not just that, but she's being forced to cover. They're making her
Yeah,
cover, and it's like, dude, this is America. If she didn't want to cover, she wouldn't cover. And I
Yeah.
think that that's what people don't get, is that they, in their mind, they still think that there's this forced conversion or forced covering or forced, and they're not putting two and two together. They're not putting two and two together.
Well, the thought of not
Well,
being hedonistic is just un-American.
And that in itself is true. Why you don't drink, you don't eat bacon. These things, they're really unthinkable to a lot of people. And it really catches people off guard that there's people who don't do these things because it's so normalized. Going back to the normalization of deviance, it's so normalized in society that somebody doesn't do it has become odd. That somebody wants to be holistic, healthy, is strange. It's strange. So
well, you could tell someone that you're not drinking because of AA, they'll accept that. But if you say I don't drink anyway, and I don't drink because I'm Muslim, we don't drink, then it turns into, oh. And then they sometimes get an attitude like, you think you're better than us.
right,
You're trying to tell them why you can't come to their little social event. I can't come. I can't come to that. Because I used to be involved in interfaith stuff, and people would invite me sometimes, like, I can't come over this drinking the wine stuff going on and all that. I'm just not going to come. I hope it's a nice party you have, but
Right.
it's a little not what they think. They think
yeah.
you're just supposed to accept everything wrong they're doing, and you're supposed to be a part of it and not be judgmental to the point that you're going to surround yourself with it. Well, I'm not interfering with somebody doing something, but I'm not going to be around it. They don't
Right.
understand that kind of thinking. It's kind of different.
I
The
think that
thinking,
I was going to say, I think that that's part of the issue, is that they take it as that we said they shouldn't do something, or rather, we say we don't do something as our saying you shouldn't do it. And
right?
that's not what we're necessarily saying. We're simply saying
Right.
I choose not to do it. I believe that this is wrong. I won't do it. But if you want to do it, that's your thing. I'm not responsible for what you do.
But if you give them a lecture like that, then they really think you're off the. You can't go tell them all that.
I'll go back to the whole inviting people to Islam thing, and when I used to work with this guy, and every now and he'd go, he'd go to the bar, and he'd do his thing. He was not Muslim, and like maybe once a month, I don't know how often, just every now and then I joke with him like, hey man, when are you going to enter Islam? Hey, you getting ready to accept Islam? I thought this was the week, and I just throw stuff out like that because I wanted to plant the seeds that it's okay. If he wants to enter Islam, he can, and not have it as a foreign concept that he can't. And I think that just presenting the idea to somebody that they can become a Muslim is actually empowering, because a lot of people don't think, as CJ started out saying, he said that, they'll say that it's not for me. Well, why? They don't know, because they don't think that it can be for them. When I remember when I first entered Islam, I went to Juma one week, and when I left, I heard somebody saying, "Man, the imam must be giving real nice sermons because even white people are going." Right? And and the idea was that people don't, even to this day, despite how many white Muslims there are, societally speaking, we're still a minority. And so societally speaking, it's still this idea that it's not for us. It's okay for you guys, but it's not okay for us. And we really have to plant seeds in people's hearts and minds to let them know, no, this is for everyone. This is for everyone. It's guidance from God. Nobody has a right to this. I mean, rather, let me say, everybody has a right to it. Nobody has more right than someone else to it. That's a better way of saying it.
I I want to ask CJ something here. I don't know when you decided to become a first generation Muslim. How long ago was it?
He's like early in the show when it was presented to me. Go on.
Mashallah. No, I was 19, so 23, 24 years, somewhere around there.
I'm just wondering what you thought when you first heard about Islam. Because when I came, I'll just give you a little bit of background here. When I came into Islam, that hippie stuff and everything was going on. And that's a true statement. I say that when I became a Muslim, wearing hijab and stuff was weird, and being a white Muslim was weird. But there were also people in the street that wore metal pyramid heads. They had a pyramid cult that came through our town. And I mean, it helped the hijab thing in a kind of an odd way. But we didn't have this presentation that was anti-white or hate America and stuff. So when you were hearing about Islam, were you always already thinking that this was against America to be Muslim?
To be honest with you, the first thing I heard about Islam, I had just come home from a juvenile incarceration, and I had ran into a friend, and I had asked about another mutual friend. He pointed me in the relevant area of where he was staying and said, "But yo, you don't want to go see him. He's on his Japanese stuff."
Japanese stuff.
Yeah. So I went and I hunted this friend down, and I viewed the man as an older brother at the time anyway. I had just recently had my first child, and I wanted something different with my life. And he showed me that that was possible. This is someone that I followed into doing wrong with. And then he showed me that there is a way. He didn't say, "Hey, look, this is what you got to do. This is what we're doing." He said, "Look, this is what I do. There's a library over there. You can go look it up for yourself." And he showed me a good example on what was there. So it wasn't difficult for me to see it firsthand and accept it.
The Japanese thing was Islam.
It was
Yes,
Islam, yeah.
it was
That's
Islam.
interesting. Okay, we just don't know. Yeah, okay. But I was thinking because when I converted, there was such a bunch of I kind of call it the idiot show or clown show. I mean, there was everything was going around in the spiritual quest. It was kind of in. There was no compelling reason that I even thought of why I couldn't be a Muslim. Whereas today, I think people are thinking this is going to really ruin my life if I do it. Because we thought people could be, I tell people sometimes it was either Islam or the Hare Krishnas. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it could have been, who knows? But it wasn't anything that odd to get into a different spiritual kind of trip, as people would have called it, right? So, but now it's like there's so much stuff against Islam. It's like people are thinking, "Oh, if I become Islam, man, my whole life is really going to get ruined." I mean, it was bad enough when I became Muslim and my family got madder than whatever. But I didn't foresee it as being anti-society or anything. As
Well,
right?
let me at the end of this chapter, at the end of 14, let me read this real quick, right? And that is that, give me one moment. It's recorded. It is even recorded in the Bible that the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, alayhi salam, peace be upon him, is reported to have said to his followers, "Think not that I have come to send peace on earth. I had come not to send peace, but a sword." And that's Matthew 10:34. And the idea here isn't that he came to start war. It's not that he came to fight people, but rather that's the consequence when a people call people to the truth, when they call people away from the status quo, when you stop being a serf, when you stop following the herd, when you start thinking differently than what they want you to think, or everybody's been doing the same exact thing, and you say, "Wait a minute, I found that that's not the best thing for us," then automatically you face opposition. And so Jesus knew that. And so he's saying, "I didn't come to spread peace, but rather to spread the sword," because he's calling people to the truth. And the people, who was he calling? He was calling the Jews, right? So when he's calling the Jews back to Judaism, he's not calling to them something foreign. He's calling them back to the message that they already knew. But because it was going against the status quo, they wanted to rise up against him, as we see in the Bible, as we see in the Quran. And so it's the same way when we call people to the truth, then when we take upon the truth in our own lives and then we present it to other people, we face that same opposition because we're calling them away from the status quo.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be the odd man out.
Mm.
Well, when I converted, if you, I don't know, you could
The
be a
odder
real
the better
conservative.
back in the day, right?
Well, I mean, you
It,
could have been
it
odd, or you could have been the other way. I mean, it was just so there was so much of everything going on. It was
So
actually kind of a quintessential.
that happened for a lot of people. I mean, some people, you got Ram Dass, and many people like Ram Dass who became Hindus,
Right.
and they became, they went over, they spent time, they came back as gurus and the like. Then you have people like Cat Stevens, you have Sheikh Nuruddin Durki, who was with Ram Dass. He was one of the best friends of Ram Dass. Those two are, it's an interesting story between them. I won't get into a lot of it, but Ram Dass and Sheikh Nuruddin Durki, they was friends before their spiritual enlightenment, right? And like in school, they were friends. And then one of them became a Hindu guru, the other one became a Muslim sheikh, a Muslim scholar. And then they retained their friendship. They remained friends. And both of them just passed away in the last 5 years or so. But they retained their friendship even after that. But this is what happened in that period is people were looking for spiritual enlightenment, and they found it in a myriad of ways. And right now, everybody's materialistic and there's no real thought of spirituality. And so when we present to them spirituality, it really is seen as something foreign, something that is in opposition to the status quo.
Well, it's this worship of science has gotten to the point of, science is our god. I mean, are you guys hearing this crazy noise going
Yes.
on? Is that a
Yes.
whose computer's doing that? Let me see if it's mine. Let me go off and come back in.
Okay.
Let me. I don't know what that is.
Me either.
I don't even know how to get out of here. Okay, I'm just gonna do that.
But,
do you still
yep.
hear it?
Nope. It seems as though. No, I do hear it.
It's probably the upstairs of my house.
Okay.
My family's moving around upstairs.
I don't know. You know what it could be, and I don't know. It could be when I
Maybe
speak.
static from the headphones.
I think that the what's being heard because you got new earphones on, new headphones on,
Right.
so it might be coming around to the mic. I don't know.
Mm, mashallah.
No problem. Hopefully the sister will rejoin us. One thing. Yep, here she is. Alhamdulillah. So let's add her back.
Was it me?
No, it's not you. We think that it's CJ. We'll check it later. It's no big deal. If it's annoying somebody, well, alhamdulillah. Hopefully the conversation will make up for it.
As long as it's not
I
my fault, I'm all right.
CJ brought up a good point earlier, and I think that we'll end the conversation really talking about this a little bit, and then we'll close with the conversations, your closing remarks like we normally do. But going back to this idea that Christianity is white, or Christianity is for white people, and this idea that the Trinity is the belief system that white people are supposed to have, and if we don't retain that or we don't hold fast to that, we're somehow race traders or something crazy wild like that. This is something that needs to be addressed. So I'll let you guys address it.
Islam is the faith that says it's for everyone. It's not, you know what I mean? If your faith is based on your religion, there's some ignorant. You know what I mean? If not, I'm sorry. How can I say this right? If your
If your
faith
faith is
is based on your race,
there you go.
there's some ignorance in there that you need to readjust. There's something that you need to look internally and have a real thought process. If you think God wants you to separate yourself from other people based on your skin color, you need some self-reflection.
Sister.
Mm. Well, Islam is foreign to this culture in that it's starting to spread out. I guess the feeling was it was okay when just some slaves were were Muslim, and even back then they were trying to turn them into Christians. Way back in the real old days. But this is like this is normal living. This is like a normal way to live. And if we, if I was dressed just like everybody else, and if I was willing to have a few drinks, I don't think anybody would have anything to say against this religion. But what they want is they want to keep the culture looking a certain way and not have any comments against it. And I think we're a visual comment against society in their view. You know what I'm saying? So
No,
it's
no,
kind of
that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point that we're a visual enough a visual affront to the
right,
status quo. That's
right.
a good point.
It,
And
it
I
challenges the
definitely
narrative.
exactly. Um, and the sister, Carol, you brought up a wonderful point about Islam. I don't necessarily think you brought it up in the most beautiful way,
Sorry.
but no, it's okay. But you brought up a
Uh,
wonderful point. You had mentioned slaves being Muslims,
Hmm.
and that's something that we also have to understand is that Islam has been part of this continent before Europeans came. The Islam, there was Islam amongst Native American tribes before Europeans came. And when the first Europeans came, they actually brought Turkish slaves with them, right? So they brought Muslim slaves into the country. And the problem was is that they looked like Europeans, and so they if they escaped, the people in the next colony over wouldn't necessarily recognize them as slaves, but then they also would go and mix with the Native American tribes who were already Muslim. And so there is this reality that, and then when the African Americans were, or the Africans were brought over as slaves, they brought Islam with them as well. And so we have historic masjids in areas in the South where, we have traces of Islam. So Islam's been here since before the Europeans and along with the Europeans and then after the Europeans as well. And so the reality is that Islam is part of the history of this nation. But again, we're not necessarily just speaking about America in general. We're talking specifically about white folk in America. And the fact that white folk have this idea that if they accept Islam, that they're losing part of their identity. And to be fair about that, they are. Because they are, again, and we talked about this, we're going to talk about this again and again because there's a reality. When we're around white folk, we're not as white as them because somehow we're the other because now we're Muslim. And when we're around the Muslims, we're not like other Muslims because we're white folk, right? And so there is that in between area, which is again why we do have to network. There is that need to network. But what I'm saying here is that nobody, again, and I'll repeat this, and I think that I read it earlier. I don't feel like looking for it now, but nobody's asking us. Here it is. Actually, I found it. No, we are not being asked to adopt the language or cultural identity of other people. We will retain our own cultural identities. We will remain the white man in America, but we'll also be Muslims, living upright lives in accordance with God's guidance. The idea is that we retain our identity, we retain our cultural heritage, but we purify it according to the guidance of God. And I think that this is, but again, I want to return back to the main point that I wanted to discuss, and that is that we have to understand that we have to counter the narrative that Christianity is white.
Well, the churches and Christianity itself, Christianity was used to unify the Roman Empire and Europe and justify all the royalty and all that stuff. And there have been quite a few religions that developed, after the Protestant Rebellion and all that, and some of these other religions came up that pretty much disguise themselves as a type of Christianity in order to survive. like Christian Scientists and new thought churches, this kind of stuff.
Right.
So that they would they're not really a Christian approach to life. It's more positive thinking and this sort of thing. But or like the Unitarians, they would
Right.
emphasize this. They would have to be Christian as a white person or be totally rejected from society.
Right. That was
And
the way that they could get people to be attracted to their teachings, is by calling it Christianity.
and to hide within society itself. So there is that history there, and I think there's this idea that Islam also in some churches is preached, as the Antichrist and all this kind of stuff, and Satan. I mean, it's all part of some of this end time stuff some of these churches have that's against that. But it's like they'll accept almost anything except somebody going Muslim. You know what I'm saying? They'll accept they'll accept almost anything as long as it's not something that is this close to their core beliefs.
Actually, you just brought up an amazing point, that if I was to say I'm a spiritualist, I'm a new age spiritualist, I believe in the goddess of whatever, I worship Venus and I do astrology, people would say, oh, they're a weirdo, but they would be accepting of that,
It's going to
right?
be a white person. Yeah.
Right. But as soon as you say I'm a Muslim, whoa, what happened?
Right.
And there is that yeah, there's that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of funny because if you read older writings in Christianity, in the beginning with the Catholic Church and stuff, they referred to Islam as a Christian heresy.
Right. Right.
So it went from Christian heresy to, this isn't even a white man's thing. And why? If you look at it, we don't live that much different than conservative Christians would normally live, except maybe they're drinking actually, some of them don't drink alcohol. We're actually living very conservative lives along the same level. I mean, that is probably more scary to them than somebody becoming Buddhist.
Well, and we're going to come to this as we move through the book, that the idea that Islam was actually held back from the masses by the people in power, by the ruling class, by the ministers, by the church, because if the common people, and again, there's communities throughout Europe. Poland has a 300-year-old Islamic community in Poland. Time and time again, when people would hear the message, the common people, they would enter into Islam. And then we also find throughout history that their Christian neighbors would come kill them. But the thing is that when people would hear this message, they would adopt this message. And so it's prevented, it's historically prevented from us by those in charge over us, by our own people. And even today, that's the case, is that the media, the message is that this isn't for us. And who's presenting it? It's the people in charge. It's the people in charge who are presenting this, trying to be a blockade from the average person hearing what is Islam.
Yeah.
It's for all the intents and purposes, for a wider society, they shouldn't be afraid of Muslims, because why wouldn't you want a neighbor next door who's not getting drunk or stealing from you or doing these things? Why wouldn't you want neighbors like that?
And CJ, you was going to say something?
I was going to say, because the narrative is now that if your neighbor is a Muslim, he might blow up the block.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, there is that. Yeah.
But it's not even, my thing, and it's not even about the Muslim. My thing isn't about the Muslim. It's about Islam, to where the people, they're not even open to hearing what is Islam. They could care less, and they'll say this. I mean, sometimes it's lip service. I don't care what you are. You do your thing. As long as you're not disrespectful, it's okay. That kind of message. But the thing is that they're afraid to hear the message of Islam. They're actually afraid to engage with the message of Islam. And so what will happen is that they'll regurgitate some talking points. They'll regurgitate, different things that they heard, but they're not able or willing to engage in actual conversations of any depth.
It's a cut and paste conversation off the internet. It's like
Yeah,
they're just they're saying these um things they don't know anything, so they say what they've heard before. And it
exactly,
just they just
exactly.
keep repeating it because they can't even listen to what your answer to it
They
is.
don't. They refuse to
Yeah.
listen, and that's again. It goes back to when will we get the courage to even hear the message, and that's what we really again. That's what we're working towards. That's what we're working towards. So I think that we've gone all over the map, but I do think that we covered the main points in these two chapters. I'll start, ladies first. Sister Carol, if you have any closing thoughts, anything that you think can summarize this, what we've gone over, or present this message, in a way.
Well, Islam is a universal message. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has invited us all to it by the mere fact that people have even heard about it. I would say now today, most people in the world have at least heard the word. And if oh gosh, what do I want to say? If 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 people can be open to it, they might find a better way to live, a better way to be a human, a better way to relate with their neighbors, with everyone else, without so much clutter going on. To me, it's almost like a kind of a, in one sense, it's sort of a minimalist religion, and in another way, it can get quite intellectual and this sort of thing. Anybody can be a Muslim. Anybody can take that step, become a Muslim, decide to try to. I mean, you can't be perfect in the beginning. It's difficult, but I mean, for a lot of people, a lot of these things are difficult. But you can start taking step by step, see how things progress, see how it improves, and it will build a better society. And the white man needs a better society. This could change everything if people accepted normative Islam that was a balanced approach and is as closest to what the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam presented to us and tried to express. That's what I think.
CJ.
If you want a more peaceful existence, a more calming existence, a less stressful existence, pull up that little thing that you're using for social media, do some research into Islam. The message is there. Anything you want to find out is there. You can, if you don't know how to ask the question, Google local Islamic center. Go there. Somebody will be able to point you in the right direction.
So I'm going to close, again returning to the ideas of these two chapters, and I'm going to say, the message is that there is only one God, that He is without partner, He is without equal, He is the only one absolutely worthy of being worshipped. He created mankind into nations and tribes, not so that we may disrespect one another, or create injustices between ourselves, but so that we may know one another. And we are commanded to assist one another in good and do not assist one another in bad. The reality is that Islam, the message of God, the guidance of God, is our birthright as a human being, regardless of what race or what ethnic background we come from. As white folk in America or anywhere else in the world, we have a right to Islam. It is our birthright as much as it is anybody else's. And it's not, again, Islam does not ask us to change who we are. It doesn't ask us to change our heritage. It doesn't ask us to change our identity. What it asks us is to purify our way of life, purify how we carry ourselves, purify ourselves so that we ourselves become dignified, noble human beings, and our families become dignified families, and our communities become strong, dignified communities. And if we do what we're supposed to do, we can heal. We can heal ourselves, we can heal our families, we can heal society. but we have to do what we have to do. And what is it that we have to do? We have to surrender ourselves to the guidance of God. That's it, right? That's it. That's the message of Islam. And I want to re-emphasize that there is going to be opposition. If a person enters into this deen, if they enter into this Islam, then what's going to happen is people are going to oppose you. And this is, again, just like Jesus said, I did not come to spread peace, but rather I came to spread the sword. Not because he was being violent, but because people are going to oppose that message, because they want to cling to the status quo. And now you're scaring them, showing them that if you change, they might be able to change too. And change is scary, right? And so you are going to find opposition, but the opposition isn't towards you. The opposition is towards this message. The opposition is towards the potential for change that they're not willing to take, right? And so, or make, I should say. And so I think that this is a good way to close. And I did say that, but if there's anybody who wants to feed off of what I just said, they can, and then we'll formally close and end this. Anything from either of you?
No.
Well, I do like um I do like the idea that we're trying to be fully human, not even just dignified humans. We're trying to be fully human and rise up to what God really intended for us to be, as opposed to rejecting Him and rejecting what He wants, so we stay at a lower kind of
or
basis.
even opposing our very human nature
Right.
by following the liberal agendas. And I'll leave it there.
Oh
And I'll
yeah,
say
yeah, yeah. Okay.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Again, I thank both of you for joining us, and I thank everybody who viewed it. Anybody who wants to add to the conversation, the comment section is there. Until next time, peace be with you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Well, that's all.
Assalamu alaikum.